Tonight, it's Batman meets Emperor Penguin for the first and probably last time. The movement was doing defund the police 10 years before it was cool, and Dial H does a lot, man. I don't want to get into it. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 87 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and this is like the fifth time I've tried to record this intro, and every time I try to sell of, whoa, here's why this episode's so cool, like, oh, we're at a WTF month, or we got a brand new number one, or Batwing's a new character, but I can't sell any of that because all of that's like, yeah, okay, it's cool. Not great, but it's cool, I guess. So all in all, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's another week. We're still doing this. It's been 87 weeks. What's that Titanic line? It's been like 84 years or something like that. It's been 87 weeks and we're still going at it. So in the interest of this being just another week, why don't I tell you the comics that are coming out and you can choose which ones you want to listen to. But please listen to them all because, like, I got bills to pay, man. And watch time is the only way I get that. So please, I'm begging you. Anyway, we have the number 20 issues of Batwing, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, and Swamp Thing. Nope, and Animal Man. Almost missed Animal Man. As these weeks get more complicated with different numbers and stuff, it's so much harder to read my own list. Additionally, we have the number 12 issues of World's Finest, Earth 2, and Dial H. We have the number 8 issue of Phantom Stranger. We have the number 19 issue of Aquaman, because that got delayed from last month. And as I hinted at the beginning, a brand new number 1 in The Movement, a superhero team consisting of a bunch of teenagers who live in the poor side of town. I kind of liked it. I'd say check it out, at least issue 1. It's a little interesting. So yeah, that's what's coming out this week. Like I said, basic week though, so I don't really have anything else to say. We don't even have an event going on. Green Lantern's got delayed, so here's some Batman. Detective Comics number 20, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. So last issue was the oversized issue because it was like 900 or something like that. But the story that we covered was about Man-Bat. And it barely has anything to go into this. This is pretty much just picking up with like, oh, hey, we haven't been able to tell our Ogilvy story for like 6 months. So let's go ahead and just wrap that up. So it opens up with Ogilvy and Penguin's gang just walking up to a bank, and he just robs it in plain daylight. He kills a bunch of people. He beat up a bunch of people. And then he looks at the camera after stealing $3 million, and he says, "Come and get me, Batman." And then we see the Batmobile just crashing through Penguin's mansion gates. And he's like, yeah, no, I mean, I'm here. I'm going to do this. Like, I should have dealt with him earlier. And he calls out Ogilvy, and Ogilvy stands in the doorway, silhouetted, and we see him as he steps out in the light and throws some punches at Batman that he is different. He has dark skin and red eyes and, like, super strength. He's taken something. But then we cut to earlier that day where Oswald Cobblepot, old Penguin, he is getting off on his crime because the only thing they could really tie him to is trespassing at the zoo, which the judge was like, I mean, you kind of donate a lot of money to the zoo, so it's kind of yours, I guess. Whatever. Point being, you're free to go. And Alfred sees Penguin outside the courthouse, and he calls up Batman. And he's like, hey, Batman, Oswald's been on the phone ever since he got let free, and he keeps on saying the name Ogilvy, like, angrily and really loud. Maybe you should look into that. And Batman's like, I'm already on it, Alfred. You're 2 steps behind me here. And we see him interrogating a guy named Mosaic, who sounds really familiar, but I can't remember exactly where we ran into him before. But regardless, Mosaic's like just laying down all the stuff. He's like, yep, Ogilvy, he's got this big plan. We don't know what it is, but like, we did that man-bat thing last issue in order to steal some chemicals from Star Labs. Like, that's why we did it. And Batman's like, okay, well, I don't know anything about that, but I'll go ahead and look into it. And so he tosses Mosaic down and says, all right, let's get into the part of the book that we opened with. So cut back to the fight between Ogilvy and Batman. And Batman's getting his ass handed to him. He is getting knocked down pretty hard. And Ogilvy's like, I've been planning this for years and you are not going to get in my way. And Batman's internal monologue is like, okay. Clearly he has a little bit of man-bat in him because he is, gross looking. And underneath his skin, or he has like a light, apparently the skin isn't actually black, it's like a light coating of fur. But then underneath that, his skin is apparently like armor or bark because Poison Ivy has been doing a thing in all the backup stories. And then Batman comments on his strength and like, oh, you know what I bet he stole? I bet it was something like Venom, like what Bane has. So now he's like pretty strong, not as strong as Bane, but pretty damn strong. So this is going to be pretty hard. But basically, Ogilvy comes up at that point. He pulls out this big, thick chain, wraps it around Batman's neck, and just hangs him in a tree. And he's like, well, that's it for Batman. I'm going to rule my empire now in terms of Gotham. So he goes inside. He calls up the mayor, and he's like, hey, Mayor Haiti, I want to talk about a peaceful transition of power. And by peaceful, I mean I'll let you live. And at that point, we see Batman still about to die out in the rain outside. And his chain gets snapped. And as he looks up, it's Penguin, old Penguin. And he's like, hey, I'm here to get my stuff back. I'm here to take out him. I know you want to take out him. Let's work together for just like 10 seconds. So Batman stumbles back into the house and Ogilvy's like, well, I mean, I almost killed you before. I could just kill you again. And Batman's like, I was fighting you as if you were still a man. But here's the thing. I don't think you were ever a man. You were always a monster. And so he throws out all the like dirty tricks. He throws out like some acid and some electricity and some gas and whatnot. And he manages to take out Ogilvy over the course of like one page. And Ogilvy's like, psh, whatever. Doesn't matter. I still managed to beat you. Even if it was just for a tiny little bit, I ran Gotham. And therefore, I will not be forgotten. I will be remembered forever. Ogilvy will be remembered. And then Penguin steps up, holds his umbrella gun to the guy's head, and he's like, yeah, you'll be remembered. Your history. And then he shoots Ogilvy in the head. And Batman's immediately like, dude, you know that's not okay. And he's like, I bet that he's fine. He's still alive. They don't tell us how, but he's still alive. And so basically Batman's like, all right, fine. What do you want? And he's like, just get him out of here. This is my house again. So then we get an epilogue where Penguin is out and about again, and Batman's like, yeah, I kept an eye on him after that because I knew he'd show back up. I didn't expect him to show back up this soon, though. But instead of going as Batman, he goes as Bruce Wayne because it turns out Penguin is changing the name of the Children's Center back to the Martha Wayne Children's Center from the very beginning of the arc. And he's like, yeah, look, the last time I stepped out of the shadows, I put a target on myself and people started gunning for me. So I'm just going to live in the shadows instead. You can have your stupid little children's center. Like, I know what I want, and it's not able to be grabbed in the light. And he walks away, and Batman's like, oh, but I'll be waiting for you in the shadows as well, Penguin. And then we see this person up in the rooftops, and he's like, well, Bruce Wayne, I'm here to kill you. I don't know who the person is. He doesn't say anything about it. It's just a person here. He's got to kill Bruce Wayne. So I feel really bad for this arc, all things considered, because it felt like it kept getting preempted. I've said this numerous times. We had Death of the Family. We had the death of Robin. We had this 900 issue. It felt like John Layman was never really able to tell this story that he wanted to. Now, mind you, I do think most of the story was told in the backups, and I haven't gotten the chance to do that yet. I will do that in a few weeks' time after this issue, but it feels weird that the main story of each of these books is just not this. And then all of a sudden, Emperor Penguin's just like, here I am. And they just end it right there. It's so baffling to me that this is how they decided to wrap. Like, they didn't even give a main story where he took any sort of serum. We never saw that. Maybe he did in the backup, but if someone was just following the main stories, we never saw him turn into this like freak looking monster thing. So yeah, it just feels weird. As for this particular issue, it's fine. It's not great. It's not awful. It's just the end of something that I wish had more build up the entire time. So, I mean, overall, I got to give this one like I got to give it like a 6. And that's disappointing because the art is fantastic and I like his voices for the characters, but there was nothing to latch onto. Ogilvy felt like a background story in his entire arc, and he was a backup story, so yeah, it's a 6. Batwing number 20, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Eduardo Pansica and Julio Ferreira. So, we got a new Batwing. As teased last issue, David Zavimbe has abdicated the title, and Batman immediately turned around and was like, hey, I actually always wanted to give it to Luke Fox. So this issue picks up, still in Africa. He's still sent to Africa for some reason, and he's beating up a group of ant-based gun runners, I guess, called the Marabunta. And he's jumping around and he's outnumbered like crazy. And basically it's just an opening page of Luke laying out the land of it. And he's like, yeah, no, you sent me in here to fight all these illegal firearms and whatnot of these Marabunta soldiers or fanatical blah, blah, blahs. And Batman's like, you talk a lot, man. Like, I'm over the comms here to help you out on your first couple missions, but like, can we just focus on the fighting? And he's like, okay, well, maybe because I'm massively outnumbered, you should send me a care package. And he's like, fine, whatever, if you really think you need one. So at that point, not the leader of the Marabunta, but a higher up soldier named Lady Marabunta shows up in a giant ant mech suit. And he's like, how far out is that care package? And Batman tells him 20 seconds, try not to die. And he's like, oh, try not to die. I didn't read that rule in the official Batman Incorporated handbook. He's like, oh, well, there's plenty of rules that are not in there. For instance, always pay attention as Luke gets like caught up in an explosion that's blowing up a nearby plane. And so he just hides out in the rafters for a while until the thing that Batman's sending shows up. And it turns out it is a colony of vapor bats, which seem to be robotic. Maybe this was a thing. I don't know. Regardless, it manages to spread out some gas that chokes out the Marabunta enough that Luke can take her captive and get some information from her. So he drives off, and then Batman's like, oh, good job. We'll reconvene in 200 hours or whatever. And he talks to Alfred, and Alfred's like, hey, just for people who didn't read the last issue, here's what happened to the old Batwing. And also, are you sure that you should be like giving him this like much one-on-one time with you, because you're kind of babying him? And he's like, nah, he's new, I have to do this. And basically they just keep laying down the fact of, no, I wanted him as the original Batwing, but A, Lucius can never find out about that because it's not a cool thing, and B, he also has some like personality quirks and he doesn't do so well with like authority. So kind of a thing we need to work on. So anyway, we see somewhere deep in the city, he's taken this woman, Lady Marabunta, to be interrogated. He used some scarecrow fear toxin to enhance the interrogations. And she's not fazed. Like, she's scared, but she's just like, I can tell by your voice you're like 20-something and you're from America. Probably like a rich family considering that suit. And he's like, well, yes, but also let me tell you my origin. And I don't think he's telling it to her, but to us, we see him basically telling his dad, hey, I want to take a year off from college and whatnot, from job hunting, in order to just see the world. And Lucius is like, no, you got to work for it. Like, you think that I got all this just by being lazy and seeing the world? And Luke is only saying this because Batman came to him and said, hey, please be Nightwing, or Batwing. And he just needs a cover story for him to be able to disappear for a year. And Lucius is like, no, I can't believe you would throw your life away. And he's like, I'm not throwing my, you do understand I'm still super smart and super strong. Like, I'm going to have those job offers when I get back. Why don't you trust me, Dad? And he's like, oh, I do trust you. I just think you're stupid. And so Luke storms out and he's like, look, regardless of what you say, I'm doing this. I just hope to have your blessing. So at that point, the interrogation continues and she's like, okay, fine. I'll tell you all the Marabunta stuff, but they're going to remember you, Batwing, and they're going to come for you. And he's like, yeah, I'm counting on it. So then I just have to throw this in. We throw in one little panel here of him talking to Batman when Batman's like, hey, you want to join up in Batman Incorporated? And he's like, where are you sending me? Oh, to Africa. Why? Because I'm the black guy? And Batman has the creepiest smile. And he just says, that's funny. So apparently the whole way Marabunta get their funding is through an illegal, secretive diamond mine. So Batwing just goes in, scares all the workers, gasses them, and he sees in the middle of this diamond mine is a palace. And he's like, okay, I knew there was a warlord here, but the fact that he has an actual palace in this diamond mine seems like way over the top. Palace doors open, there's a bunch of lions that jump out. He specifically says he's not killing the lions. That's not his place, but he is tranking them and taking them out. So they're all down. Then we see 3 African women come out with full, like, Black Panther-esque fighting gear, and a dude who is best way I can describe it is a centaur, but it's lion parts. So his bottom half is, like, mostly a lion, and then his top half is just the furry version of a lion. So anyway, all the women start fighting Batwing. He manages to get the upper hand on him, showing off his fighting skills and whatnot. But then immediately this big guy named Lion Mane shows up and he's like, oh, I am king of the beast. I was chosen by the gods to rule these people. And he starts beating the crap out of Batwing, going deep into one of the caves inside this diamond mine. And he's like, oh, I'm not able to claw my way through your armor, so I'll just mash you to bits inside of it. And he starts just pounding on Batwing, and final page is a cliffhanger of him being held up by his neck as Lion Mane roars. Gotta say, it's a stupid looking villain, but he is menacing at the very least. So, of course they're not going to kill Batwing. Like they put at the end of this, they're like, oh, is this over before it even begins? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm sure. It's not the rest of this trade is for. But, like, I'm okay with it. You know, these books are always going to have a, oh no, what's going to happen next time? I do hope that they don't make it a Deus Ex Machina. You know what I mean? Where like, oh, actually I was just luring him deep into this cave so I could press this button on my arm and then I win immediately. I hope they actually take the time to let Luke earn this. And that's the thing, is that I get that he's smart. I get that he's strong. And I appreciate the fact that he's the hero of the story, so he does have to come out on top. But I want to feel, especially because he's just starting fresh, the process of him losing some, him learning something, and him coming back stronger next time. And I feel like this first issue has just been a bit too successful, where he's just gotten win after win after win. If they're setting it up for, okay, a bunch of wins and then he suffers a major loss because he gets cocky, I'd also be good with that. But I just don't want this to be like the golden child sort of thing, where he is just unable to fail throughout the entire time. I want to see, like in the last Batwing book, like David Zavimbe failed numerous times, but he kept learning and getting better. I want to see that for Luke. I want to see that story arc. I think the things with the dad are okay. With Lucius, it's fine, but if they don't focus on that, I'm not going to be hard pressed on it. So overall, for an intro to this particular character, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I like the voices, except for Batman. Batman sounds off, but I mean, it's a Batwing book. As long as you got the voice for him right, I'm interested. I'm looking forward to seeing more. So 7.5. Action Comics number 20, written by Andy Diggle and Tony S. Daniel, art by Tony S. Daniel. So last issue, Lex injected Superman with some nanobot something or another to mess with his DNA, and he activated it and made Superman's right hand totally creepy alien looking. So this issue picks up with, oh, and it's also set a year ago. I think the whole story has been set a year ago, which I don't get why. But regardless, Lex is fighting like his karate trainer or something like that. And the guy's like, Lex, you may be super smart, but you'll never know anything until you know yourself. And then Lex just like kicks him in the groin and was like, oh, that'll teach you not to close your eyes. I guess we both learned something today. So then Lex's robot assistant comes in and says, excuse me, Mr. Luthor, we activated that virus thing. Superman's health signs went totally flat, and we think he's dead. And Lex is like, oh, well, that sucks. I kind of wanted to beat him up a little bit, but hey, whatever, bring me his body, and then I'll show them what Superman really is. And then we see Superman waking up, and he is in the center of the earth with Dr. Shea Veritas, and she's like, hey, I teleported you here as soon as your like infection thing was going on, so just so it couldn't get to other people. It's taken care of. Your super immune system knocked it out, but you may be feeling really weak because it took a toll on you. And Superman's looking down and he's like, oh, I mean, I guess I'm okay, but you're right, I do feel weak. But like I could feel when my hand changed, like it had a mind of its own. And she's like, yeah, no, that's like, we can talk about that later. Anyway, you need to get dressed. And he's like, what? How'd you undress me? And she's like, I mean, I got my ways. So they go down into the lab, and sure enough, the hand is still there. It's being contained and is being investigated. And Superman's like, you need to get all of those scientists out of there now, because that is too dangerous. And they're like, yeah, don't worry. It's not even like doing anything. As far as we can tell, it's like dead. But it does have somewhat of your cells and like your DNA in it, so it's pretty super invulnerable. I could really use you to help figure out what's going on. And he's like, yeah, all right, I'll take a closer look. And they talk it through, and it's like, maybe it was like a virus from my home planet that like I've always had in me, and it just sprung up now. Like, what's going on? So at that point, he looks at it with his X-ray vision, or his microscopic vision. He's like, oh yeah, it's Kryptonian DNA, but its own thing as well. It's a hybrid. And as soon as he says that, all of a sudden, it jumps off the table, grabs him by the neck, and starts growing rapidly. And it gets like a mouth and a bunch of other stuff as well. Veritas has a shield on, so she's not going to be affected by it. But Superman starts fighting against it with like heat vision, and Veritas is like, no, don't do that. And he's like, what? Why? He's like, I think it's feeding off your energy. Like, you're making it stronger, and it is deriving off of you. And so it manages to jump back up after Superman punches it away, and it's got like it's got a head up on him. Like, it is stronger than him and faster than him. And he's like, oh geez, and you got any opinions on how to handle this, Dr. Veritas? I'd love to hear it. And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna need you to trust me. He's like, fine, whatever, do it. And she teleports Superman and the hybrid away into a red sun radiation room. And so Superman starts getting depowered, but she logics out, well, it's got your DNA, so it's probably going to get depowered too. And it does. It starts getting weaker. And as it starts like changing and like shrinking slightly, it takes the form of like a gross plant zombie Superman. And he tells Veritas, all right, kill the lights so I can take this thing out. And she's like, I don't think it's a good idea. And he's like, oh, no, trust me. So she kills the red sun. He uses his super breath to freeze it and then just shatters it into a million pieces. And he's done. He manages to take it out. So at that point, Superman talks to Veritas and was just like, yeah, okay, here's the thing. That thing looked like it was trying to imitate me. And like a few weeks ago during the part where, not a few weeks ago, yesterday, Jimmy Olsen it was a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, Jimmy Olsen, I saw him in the battle mech. I'm seeing things, Doc. What does it mean? And she's like, you are not okay. That's what it means. You are like, you're still sick. Your body temperature is twice what it should be. You're sweating profusely and you're still weak. You need to sit down, Superman. You need to figure out what's going on. And of course, right then, there's news on the TV that Metropolis is being overrun by these creatures that have seemingly taken over the bodies of normal human beings. So we cut back to Lex and his robot, and the robot's like, I'm thinking this might not be a good idea, Mr. Luthor. And Lex is like, what? I'm sorry, do I pay you to think? Did I make you to think? Don't you think at me. And we see all of these helicopters flying in, basically trying to contain the situation because Superman's not around. And we see these zombies about to attack news crews and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden Superman shows up and they all get distracted. Every single one of them is drawn towards Superman. And he's still feeling pretty sick. But he hits the ground hard enough to send them into a underground infrastructure. He seals the rift with his heat vision. And he's like, all right, at least that'll stop it from spreading to anybody else. And then all of a sudden the ground opens up. They've all like combined into one super being or something like that. And the robot's like, geez, Mr. Luthor, what are you going to do about this if Superman's not going to be able to do it? And Lex is already in a giant mech suit. And he's like, well, just sit back and watch as Lex Luthor saves Metropolis from the alien menace known as Superman. I like this more than last issue. I'll give it that much. Last issue just felt like it was too much being thrown all at once. We had like these giant robots and then there was this extra stuff going on. This one felt more focused. This one felt like, okay, we have this virus thing that Lex started. It may have grown out of control, but it still seems like it's within his plan. It has something to do with like taking the form of other people. I'm liking the progression this is taking. My only issue with it is that it still feels like it's kind of just sprinting through it. I think that this issue probably could have extended the entire Shea Verita stuff and made the cliffhanger Metropolis is under siege. But it feels like they really are moving as quickly as humanly possible. And maybe I'm just more of a fan of decompression than these writers actually are. But I think that they could have just taken a bit more time to explore these things, explain these things, give us more of a fight scene, a more interesting, nuanced look into it than maybe it's a superbug. I wanted a little bit slower down. I wanted to just feel this a bit more. So overall, though, did enjoy it. I'll give it a flat 7. Its art is really strong, but it's still just a little bit less than what I'm looking for out of Superman. And what I think it is that they're purposely making Superman look weak because he's sick. And it works, but it's making it look like the art is failing on that front because Superman doesn't like embody Superman, you know? So yeah, I'll give it a flat 7 and I am enjoying it. I want to see where it's going to go from here. Aquaman number 19, written by Geoff Johns, art by Paul Pelletier. So last issue had like 4 different plots going on, but the biggest one is there is a icy, dead Atlantean king who comes after Mera. Aquaman's looking for a dude named the Scavenger who has Atlantean gear, and 2 Atlanteans, one of them is a sister of Ocean Master, is looking to break out Ocean Master. Those are the big beats. So this opens up with Aquaman going off to this like cliffside and blowing in his magic conch. I'm not kidding you. And out from the depths of this cliff comes a giant, horrific looking kraken that he names Topo. And all the guards are like, Jesus Christ, man, that creature's too smart. He's not able to control it with his fish control powers. And Aquaman's like, I'm not going to control it. He's my friend. I'm a buddy of his. And he goes up and he's like, oh, man, it's been a long time. How you doing, Topo? What's going on? And he basically tells Topo, look, here's the deal. I need you to find out a dude named the Scavenger. He's got like a nuclear sub that he stole. Could you just like take care of that for me? Topo, be really cool. And then Topo just dives down back into its hole. And it seems like Aquaman isn't getting what he wants. Like the Topo's just ignoring him. Because the look on his face is like, oh, geez, did I mess up there? So at that point, we see the Scavengers are like, oh, it's good. We've managed to get a couple of Atlanteans that are following us. So we can attack them soon. So then we go up to Belle Reve, where Ocean Master is being talked to by his lawyer. And the lawyer's basically like, hey, man, they're going to give you the death sentence, and maybe you should, I don't know, plead guilty to the murder charge, because like, you killed a lot of people. And he's like, excuse me, a lot of Atlanteans died too. Why is nobody caring about the Atlanteans? All you land people only care about other land people. Nobody cares about all the people who died when I was attacked, when my city was attacked. And they're like, okay, but you're here and like I'm the only friend you got, so maybe stop being such a dick. And Ocean Master's like, oh, again, you're only thinking about you land people. I got plenty of friends down in the sea. And then we see, I'm always blanking on his name, Merc. That's it. Merc and Tula have made their way to a residence of a person named Swat, who is just living out on the outskirts of town. And Merc's like, yeah, no, it's important that we find this guy because he's got some stuff we need. And they go into his house, and it turns out that he actually has like a little air bubble down there, a little like moon base. And inside of it is all this stuff from the surface, a la Little Mermaid. And they're like, oh, well, Tula's like, oh my God, he's been going up on the surface even after he was told not to. And Merc's like, yeah, this guy's a total waste of space. And they immediately get shocked by SWAT, who shows up, and he's like, hey, Merc, I thought we had an understanding. You keep my secret, I'd keep yours. And Merc goes to attack him for being shocked. He shocks him some more. And Merc then goes and rips off this mask he's wearing. It looks like a gas mask. And starts like holding his head under the water. And Tula's like, he's an Atlantean, right? What's it going to do if you hold his head underwater? And Merc's like, no, SWAT's special. He's a freak. He can't breathe underwater. That's why he likes the surface so much, because he has to breathe air. And Tula's like, okay, well, if we need him, stop drowning him. So he lets him pull his head up, puts back on his mask, and Merc's basically like, okay, look, sorry, wrong foot, but here's the deal. We're going to go free King Orm. We need your help. We know that you know the surface world better than us, so are you in or are you out? And at that point, Tula gets called by Aquaman via some telepathy crap to go and bring along the drift to help him do something. Meanwhile, south of the Florida Keys, there's a place called Kokomo, and there's this ship that is caught in a storm, and all of a sudden the storm turns to snow. Mara, I think, shows up on the boat. It's hard to say, but regardless, all the people freeze, and we see the old king, the dead king, the ice king, whatever you want to call him. He tells Mara, he's like, hey, you and me, we're going down with this ship. It's the only way the barrier to the triangle will open. It's designed to swallow ships whole. And she's like, how do you know that? And he's like, I'm your king. I designed the triangle. So at that point, he says, bow to him. Mara says, I don't really do the whole bowing thing. I'm out. And she manages to seemingly escape to somewhere else, but then later on it gets a little bit dicey. So we see Aquaman and the Drift are moving in because they believe they know where the scavengers are, because those two soldiers that were following called it in. And as they're driving around, Aquaman's like, wait a minute, you smell that? It smells like fuel. Oh, crap, everyone bail. And then all of a sudden, there's a huge explosion. They all get knocked up on the beach, and they see the submarine there. One of the Atlanteans is already dead, and the other one still technically alive, but he's been operated on, and he is missing some, like, his liver or something like that. So then we see what happened to Mara. She's made her way down to this ship graveyard or something like that. She's going around, and she's recognized by two people who call her Princess Mara. And she's like, oh, I'm back in Zebel. And she asks, where is Nereus? I need to see him right now. And then Nereus shows up, and he's like, hey, I thought you were dead, Mara. You were my wife. Where in the hell have you been? So, seems like we're going to get some stuff on Zebel. I'm not sure what it means, mainly because I'm not that familiar with Zebel, but we're on Zebel. So, I like it, but I think the scavenger plot is maybe the least explored, despite being the main plot, because it's what Aquaman's interested in. And like, I had to go back and read the last issue just to remember what in the hell was going on, because it is by far the least interesting plot as of now. You got some political intrigue with some Atlanteans wanting to break out Ocean Master. You got this huge frozen ice king who's trying to get back to like his kingdom. Those are so much more interesting, and I had no problem remembering that. It was only Aquaman's plot that's like, oh yeah, I guess that's going on. So I think it could use just either a little bit more space or just something more interesting happening. I think that having them do some sort of grotesque operation on Atlantean is a step in the right direction. But the fact that the end of issue cliffhanger is Mara, I'm more interested in that. It's far more intriguing to me. So I think they just need to be able to find what direction they actually want to go in terms of the story. There's nothing wrong with having multiple threads, but I think that they've chosen the weakest thread as their quote unquote main one. So overall, I'm going to give this one like a 7.5 though. I still did really enjoy it. I think that the art's great. But yeah, I think a shift in what they actually care about needs to happen pretty damn soon. Earth 2, number 12, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. So, last issue, we had Khalid getting the Helmet of Fate and becoming Dr. Fate and yada yada yada. This issue picks up in media res, where there is a fight going on, and we're being told it through a news report. And they just basically recap like, yeah, you guys remember there was a whole bunch of old Wonders, and then Darkseid showed up, and they all fought, and now we got new Wonders, a Flash, and apparently this new guy, Dr. Fate, who's battling someone named Wotan. Anyway, that's going on. Also, the World Army is here, and Green Lantern and Flash are fighting against them from interfering with the battle between Dr. Fate and Wotan. So that's all happening. And I wonder how all of this could have began, says the news reporter. Then we flash back an hour and we just, how did we get here? So Khalid comes out as Dr. Fate and Flash is like, hey, cool, thanks for coming here and doing all that, Khalid. And he's like, actually, when I'm in my costume, can you call me Dr. Fate? Because, like, I'm really messed up in the brain right now and I just kind of really need that separation. Like, I'm not Khalid, I'm Dr. Fate. And Flash is like, okay, sure, yeah, sorry about the whole sanity thing. And he's like, actually, you know what? It's cool. Ever since I just accepted it, I feel like kind of tranquil. And he's like, okay, anyway, my suit got kind of torn up. Can you magic me a new one? And he's like, isn't your suit connected to like your powers? And Flash just like vibrates a little bit. He's like, oh yeah, no, totally new suit. Anyway, let's go fight Wotan. And so then we go back outside and Wotan's like, oh my God, I can feel him. He's got the power. Oh geez, I can't believe this is happening. I'm going to kill him. And then Flash's mom chimes in like, yeah, well, you're kind of you were beaten before. What makes this time any different? And Wotan explains how not only is Naboo no longer Naboo, it's just his powers. Khalid is inexperienced. He's easily beatable, and Wotan is super experienced. So he's been doing this for centuries. And then all of a sudden, Dr. Fate comes out, and he's like, I'm going to beat you up because this is my powers, not yours. And then Naboo starts talking in Khalid's head like, hey, actually, Wotan's really powerful, so maybe you should just listen to me and take my advice here because, like, you're going to need it. And he's like, shut up, Naboo, I got this. I know what I'm doing. Whoops. So at that point, they just start fighting, like, a lot. Flash runs over and saves his mom, or at least gets her away from the center of the fight. Wotan's throwing some magic spells that break through some of Khalid's spells that he's casting. And Naboo's like, I told you, if you just listen, look, all of your powers are derived from Egyptian gods. And you know everything about Egyptian gods. So just like call them out in the way that you think that they would work. And so at that point, Flash is about to run in. And Khalid's like, no, hold on. Naboo's saying some stuff. Let me just try it. So he casts a spell for transportation, travelers, that makes a portal that sends them both back to Boston. Because, sure, why not? Boston. And Jay grabs his mom and says, hey, we're hitching a ride there because I don't know how to get us out of the Magic Lands otherwise. So at that point, we cut over to China 1 hour ago, where Hawkgirl and Green Lantern have made their way to a shipping yard because Hawkgirl's managed to pick up some information on Alan Scott's old lover. I can't remember his name at the moment, but regardless, they open up the shipping container, and inside of it is a bunch of dead parademons, and they've been dead for like a while. And they're like, how does this have anything to do with Sam? I don't understand. And so they're like, all right, well, we got to go back to the mob boss. He's our last lead, and we'll figure out what's going on with your with your late lover. And then all of a sudden, Alan's like, huh, okay, so I just have like this feeling in my body, like the green flame is telling me I need to get to Boston like right now. And Hawkgirl's like, no, you can't just, we're in the middle of a mystery. He's like, yeah, no, but like I actually can't resist. I want to, trust me, but I like can't. So you deal with the China stuff. I'm gonna go be involved in the main story. Bye. And so he flies off. So then we pick up, in Boston, and they've all arrived. The magic fight is breaking out in the skies, and he's pulling up, shield spells and stuff like that. He's invoking Egyptian gods. Alan Scott flies in. He's like, hey, Flash, give me the rundown. What's going on? They're like, that's up there. The golden one's the good magic dude, and the other one's the bad magic dude, and we just need to run interference and not get involved. He's like, interference from what? There's nobody else here. And then all of a sudden the World Army shows up. He's like, okay, well, I guess interference from them. So fight rolls off as we saw before. He calls out some more spells of like the god of metalworking and the god of transformation. And at some point, Wotan's like, but I too have magic, and yeah, I can easily defeat you. And then all of a sudden, he pulls out the goddess of destruction, which manages to undo all of Wotan's spells, and then he calls up Horus, the god of war, which just like kills him. And that's it. That's all he needed, which makes the rest of it seem stupid. If you have the goddess of destruction, do that first. But regardless, Wotan's gone. And Flash is like, dude, did you just kill him? And he's like, nah, I just like sent him to the ethereal plane or another dimension or whatever. But yeah, he's kind of dead. So at that point, they see that the World Army's closing in. Jay gets his mom, and all of them teleport out of there using Dr. Fate's stuff. And they arrive 4 hours later at Alan Scott's head of his company. And they're like, okay, here's the deal. Jay, your secret identity is no longer secret. Everyone knows that you're Jay Garrick. Dr. Fate, you don't really have a thing going on either. So we're going to make this, the headquarters of the Global Broadcasting Company, our base of operations. I got some like bedrooms downstairs you can stay in. And we'll just basically run a whole bunch of propaganda on the channel to make people trust us, to make the World Army back down. That's our new goal here. PR. And Alan's in like, all right, so we'll do that tomorrow, but like I got to go to China right now because I had a whole other plot going on. And then all of a sudden Dr. Fate's like, actually, in a mysticism, turn on the TV. And they turn on the TV and see that Steppenwolf, who of course was inside the country of Durain, has been outed as the ruler of Durain. And so the World Army is all about to invade and attack. And Dr. Fate's like, I think you might want to postpone your trip. Womp womp. That's the arc. Again, it's just this issue that I've had this entire arc where Wotan feels like nothing. He feels like no threat at all, and they keep building him up. They're like, oh, Wotan, this master sorcerer. Dude, he got beaten by a fence. There was a part in this where Dr. Fate just wrapped him in a fence for a while, and it, like, worked. So, I don't know. Villain for this arc has been bland as hell. If you just wanted to focus on Dr. Fate getting his powers and becoming Dr. Fate, I would have much rather the quote-unquote villain of the story be the fact that his sanity would be lost, that he did not trust himself to take this power. And they kind of focused on that, but in the end it was, who cares, you know? It was a non-factor. He's totally fine now. So, I don't know, a little bit disappointing in that aspect, but it's been a problem this whole arc, so I can't really blame this specific issue for the entire arc's problem. That being said, I can't give it any higher than a 7, so I think I'm going to go with a 6.5 on this one. Not bad, but I mean, the fact we also spent the first like 4 pages just going over, hey everybody, remember what the rest of the series was about? Yes, I know. I was there. I read it. So, yeah. I'm giving this one a 6.5, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do against Steppenwolf, and apparently Batman is showing up in the annual, so lots to do, lots to see. Interested in it all. Green Arrow number 20, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue, we had Green Arrow getting his ass absolutely handed to him by Komodo to the point where he had to retreat. And this issue picks up, as all the previous issues have, with the framing device in Black Mesa, Arizona. Arrow has finally made his way to the rock formation that he's seen. And as he gets there, he's like, man, I could die right now. And that would just solve all my problems. But nah, I guess we'll keep going because why not? And he arrives at this little teepee, and inside of it is Magus, and he's just meditating, and he's like, hey, Oliver, I genuinely wasn't sure if you'd make it here. And Oliver pulls out his bow, and he's like, all right, I'm done. Give me the answers I need. I'm done with these riddles. Just tell me what I need to know. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. This is the time for answers. You're right. I'm totally in on it. Let's get started. But then we go back to 1 week earlier, and we see Komodo. He is in a little bit of rough shape after his fight. He's being led in by his daughter, and he is just chewing out his daughter. He's like, don't, you were calling me daddy out there. Don't do that. You're giving away too much, and I'm fine. You shouldn't have come out there. Don't take off that costume. You remind me too much of your mother. So then he goes into his office, which is just this blank white room with a bunch of like holograms and stuff like that. And he comes into the cathedral, and he gets logged in, and inside is a man named Golgotha. And he's like, hey, Komodo, how's it going? And he's just like, hey, I've gotten all of Queen Industries. Like, my company's taking that over, no problem. But Green Arrow got away. And Golgotha's like, that's a problem. Really needed that to happen. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just kick you off the project. And he's like, what? No, I can go get him. I'm an outsider. I can do that. And Golgotha's like, no, you aren't. You're not an outsider. And you did have a chance. So now we're going to go ahead and send a real outsider to take care of this. And if you don't shut it down, if you don't listen to us, we're going to send the bear after you and your little girl too. And he's like, okay, yeah, fine, whatever. If you don't want me to be involved, I won't be involved. But you should know the Magus showed up. Golgotha's like, I couldn't care less about it. He's just around. He just shows up. Who cares? And then he signs off. And he steps out and he's like, okay, here's the deal. He's talking to his daughter. They want us to stop, but I'm not gonna. So we got one last thing to do. And she's like, yay, go kill Mr. Queen. And Naomi is there. And he's like, I told you you'd get your ass kicked by Oliver Queen. And he's like, actually, we have one last thing we need you to do, Naomi. So at this point, Oliver wakes up and Henry's like, hey, man, you've been out for like 16 hours. And some stuff has happened in the meantime. And he opens up his laptop, and we see a live stream going on of Naomi strung up in like a crucifix position with arrows. And he's like, oh my God, is this live? Is she alive? And he's like, I don't know. He could be faking it. It could be from beforehand, but like somehow she's there. So I don't know. I don't know what to do. And Oliver's like, I do. Get me up. I'm going to get her. And he's like, okay, first off, you can barely walk. Maybe you should call in the Justice League. After all, didn't Trevor say you only had like 2 days? And I was like, yeah, which is why I need to do this now. And he's like, okay, second thing, you don't even know where she is. And he's like, actually, I do. The thing that she's strapped to is in the Queen Mausoleum. I know exactly where they are. So he makes his way to a graveyard. And he tells Henry to sit it out. And he makes his way to the mausoleum. And he finds Naomi. And he's like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. And she's like, yeah, that's cool and all. I felt him put something on the back of my head, though. Could you check that out? And he checks it. And it's a bomb. And he's like, okay, I'll deal with that. And then Komodo shows up and starts firing arrows at him. And he's like, okay, I got to go actually deal with Komodo, Naomi. So I'm going to send Henry in. He's going to come deal with this. And he's like, who the hell's Henry? So Henry starts making his way in. And he's saying like, okay, I'm going to deal with the bomb. And you just sit there, Naomi. And he was like, hey, aren't you that guy who, like, stalked me for a little while? I was like, I didn't stalk you. I just had, like, a little crush. Just shut up. I'm going to fix this bomb. So Komodo and Oliver are having a shootout in the graveyard. Meanwhile, they're doing the whole thing of, like, do I cut the red wire or the blue wire? And Naomi's freaking out. In the end, he does end up stopping the bomb. She's safe. And Komodo's firing off shots at Oliver and ends up losing him, where Oliver then manages to get the drop on him, punches him in the face, and he's like, oh, that's how we're going to do it? No more archery? You're just going to punch me in the face? And Oliver's like, yeah, you got a problem with that? So they start punching each other just repeatedly. Komodo still manages to get the upper hand, and as he knocks Oliver down the ground, he picks him up by his hair, just like, I told you the first time we fought, I was going to kill you, and I meant it. And he's like, yeah, that's not all you told me. You also told me a true archer doesn't need a bow. And he picks up one of his arrows off the ground and shoves it into Komodo's eye. And at that point, Komodo's freaking out and just like randomly flailing after Oliver. Oliver tells him like, okay, it's over. You're going to bleed out if you don't get attention for that. And I'm going to take off that mask and see who you really are. And Komodo throws down a smoke bomb arrow to get away. Rather than just a smoke bomb arrow. Oliver manages to lose him in the scuffle, but Henry and Naomi go to him and they're like, hey, he's gone. He's fine. Oliver and Naomi hug it out, and they're just like, hey, I'm so sorry. I thought you were dead. If I thought you were still alive, I would have come after you. I'm so sorry. And he's like, no, it's cool. Like, I still want to be a part of Team Arrow. So they make their way over to the van that Oliver came in, and Henry's like, hey, Naomi, did you manage to upload the videos that would basically free Oliver's name and clear him of all the murder charges he's on? And she's like, yeah, no, I totally did that before he forced me to doctor the footage, so we're good. Oliver's name has been cleared, more or less. And we see Komodo and his girl hopping on a private jet to get to some other place. And Oliver says, okay, there's one more thing I got to do. And we cut to, again, 1 week later, he makes his way out into the desert. And he's like, well, I'm just going to drive over to Black Mesa because that seems really easy. Good thing I don't have to walk there. And then he sees police lights in his rear view. He pulls over, hands out, and he's like, oh, sorry, officer, did I do something wrong? And the officer, named Butcher, punches him in the face to knock him out. And we see Magus coming up behind. And Butcher's like, are you sure this kid's going to make it? He seems kind of soft. And Magus is like, I mean, we've certainly got to find out. So that's what set him on the walking path. Magus stole his car. I mean, do I really have to say that I love it? I think it's the art. So good. I love that so much. And again, the writing, the moments to it, it's following just great beats. There's these little punctuated marks. The bomb scene, you know he's not going to explode. You know she's not going to die. But it still felt tense. Just the way it was paced and like the structure of it, it still felt tense. And to be able to sell that to someone as jaded as me in this series, I love it. I love the fact they're managing to do that. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give this one, I don't think it's quite the strongest issue yet. I think that it still kind of fell prey to it's setting up future stuff while it's wrapping up its older stuff. So it kind of was playing both sides there, but I'll still give it a solid 8.5. It's really good. And I am looking forward to all this Golgotha stuff. What the end of the issue said, back to the island again. I'm always down for that. So yeah, 8.5, loving it. World's Finest number 12, written by Paul Levitz, art by Kevin Maguire, Geraldo Borges, and Robson Rocha. So last issue, the girls went to a gala to find Michael Holt. Turns out Michael Holt ain't Michael Holt, it's Desaad, a person who is in Darkseid's, I don't know, headquarters, his liege, whatever you want to call it. So we pick up right where we left off with Desaad basically like going in for a smooch on Karen. And she's like, oh, God, this is gross. I hate this. And so she pushes him off using super strength. And everyone, like, she's like, okay, that's Darkseid's monster. Like, I'm immediately picking up on that. So we got to take him out right now. And we see that Helena has already ripped off a curtain rod off the wall and is using it as like a javelin stick to attack Desaad. And he's just like, okay, well, I was gonna maybe just kill Karen, but now I'm killing both of you. And Karen's like, okay, I don't know what you did with Michael or who you even are, but you have no idea who you're messing with. And she uses her super strength to just like kick a hole in the floor. Meanwhile, the security guard is going to attack Helena. And he just like holds a gun to her and she's like, freeze. And so he's like, are you serious right now? And he just uses the curtain to take him out as she goes to attack Desaad again. And then more security guards come up and attack Karen. And they're like, do they not see the giant monster looking freaky dude here? And they realize, oh, wait, they don't. They actually don't. He is only revealing his true image to them. So everyone thinks that they're just attacking Michael Holt for no reason. So like, okay, well, this isn't working. We gotta go then, because we can't be like just killing some rando. So Karen grabs Helena and they just bust out the window. And all the people are like, oh, Michael, who were those people? Assassins? Should we call the cops? And he's just like, don't worry about them. I'll take care of it all. So then we cut to months ago in Tokyo, where Helena is beating up a bunch of Japanese mobsters who were apparently linked to the guy who became the radiation monster Haku in the first arc. Okay. Yeah, so she's fighting against them. They pull out guns and she's like, "Uh-oh, I might need to call for backup." And then Karen immediately shows up and starts laying down suppressing fire, more or less, taking out all the gang and just be like, "Okay, well, the guys that we interrogated, they were telling the truth. They didn't know anything that happened between the guy who became Haku and Haku. So guess that's a dead end and we don't have to deal with it anymore." And then she kicks out the door and they start flying off. And Karen's just like, "Yeah, to go save you, I had to leave this paparazzi like super party where I was getting my picture taken a lot." And Helena's like, "You really like being a celebrity, don't you?" And she's like, "You don't understand. Back on our Earth, Kal-El kept me like locked up. He didn't want anyone to know about me. So coming here and being able to be seen, it's great. It's fun." And then we see cut to now. Time magazine has run an article on Karen about how she has fallen from grace and she's like completely and utterly trash now. And Helena points out like, "Yeah, that's a bit much. Like someone is actually running like an entire like PR scheme against you. Like you are being absolutely worked against. You're not being paranoid." And then they call, I was like, "Yeah, Desaad, why does he even pick that name?" And he's like, "Actually, I think he might have been the one who inspired the Marquis de Sade, if Batman was right about his theories on Darkseid's pantheon." So then at that point, random woman comes in, secretary, I guess, and says like, "Miss Starr, the Cambridge lab, it just exploded." And Karen immediately changes into her new updated outfit, which she got in Supergirl, grabs Helena before she's even able to change, and they just fly off. And the secretary's like, "You can do it, Miss Starr. I believe in you." So obviously she has some sort of crush on Karen. Like, it's established later. So they fly off and they make their way over to the lab that's exploded. Secretary is watching on TV. And then all of a sudden, portal opens up right outside of where the secretary is. Bunch of tanks come through, all led by Desaad. And Desaad's like, "Hey, everyone, kill them all. But kill him slowly. I want to hear him scream." And so he walks through the war-torn battlefield soon afterwards. He sees all the death and destruction. He's like, "Yeah, I may be exiled here, but I'm still Desaad. I'm still going to mess stuff up." And he makes his way over to the secretary, who's still alive. And he's like, "Oh my God, you love her, don't you? And she wasn't here to say this is great. Oh, I love this so much. Let me feel your pain. Let me just have a taste of that." And he does, and she ends up dying, and he's just like, "Perfect. Ah, so good. All right, let's bail everybody out in two." So then a few hours pass, and Karen and Helena show back up, and Karen's like, oh my God, I can't believe all of them were targets because of me. They were all killed simply because I was here. We gotta go underground, Helena." And she's like, "No, I get it, man. I did that for years. Yeah. Let's do it. So me and you, we're going to go underground. We're going to find Desaad, and we're going to finish it all. Just the two of us." So Karen is a celebrity no more, and Helena's just back to what she did. I mean, I don't dislike it. I feel like this middle bit where they were like wrapping up this weird side plot of, oh, should we ever have discovered who Haku like truly was? It felt so just tacked on. And I understand that they keep doing this thing where they do the now and then parts where it's a flashback and a present day thing. But this is the first time where the flashback is after the beginning of this series. And it feels even more awkward because of it. Like, shouldn't this have just been something that we covered as it was happening rather than all of a sudden flashing back 3 months and forward again? I don't know. It just bothered me. Beyond that, Karen, of course, has her new outfit she picked up in Supergirl. That arc hasn't ended as of the publishing of this issue, which is a bit weird that they just kind of gave the game away in that. But regardless, I guess they had to. They couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. It's fine. It's a fine issue. I'm not over the moon with it, as I don't think I really have been with any of these these issues, but it's fine. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 6.5, and that extra little point 0.5 is simply because I did like the idea that someone in the company like had a crush on Karen, like was romantically involved or interested at the very least, and then they die. But it also feels a little bit like fridging, just a tiny bit. So I'm of two minds with that. But the point 0.5 is just it kept it a little bit intriguing rather than Desai just killing a bunch of faceless people. You know, like we actually had a face here that we were introduced to this issue, mind you, but still someone that we had reason to care about. The Movement #1, written by Gail Simone, art by Freddie Williams II. So this is a book that apparently spun out of the Occupy Wall Street movement that was going on at the time. I don't really want to spoil more than that, but the first little panel here, first page, picks up in Coral City, Coral City, and some cops are shaking down some teenagers, and they find out one of the guys has drugs on him. And they say, "Oh, you're a dealer, huh?" And he's like, "No, I'm not. That was strictly my own personal use. I know dealers get heavier charges, but I wasn't dealing." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, we'll see about that." And he says, "All right, here's the thing. I'll let you go with a warning, but your little girlfriend here has to give us a peek of what she's got." And then all of a sudden, we hear that line being repeated as a recording over and over again as this figure steps out wearing a silver mask, holding up a phone that says the letters ICU. And the cops are like, "Oh, okay, a wise ass. Yeah, okay, we'll take him out." They draw their guns. They're about to fire. And then they see they're surrounded on all sides by people in these silver masks holding up their phones saying ICU, all playing this message, this like recording from the cops. And they're like, "Okay, maybe we should leave. All right, have a nice day." So they all leave. We see the police captain is at his desk. Cop comes in saying, "Sir, you're going to want to see this. Your cops are on the news." And we see that the recordings have made their way to the news of how the cop was basically sexually extorting a underage girl to show herself. And immediately this captain just is like, "Turn off the TV. I'm going to go kick their asses." And he makes his way out in the bullpen, and he's like, "Both of you, you are out of here. You're on administrative leave. We're going to have a full investigation, and you are going to be fired." And they're just like, "Actually, you can't. You can't do that. We've already talked to our union rep, and we get to have an arbitration or something like that." And the captain's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to make your lives hell." So then they get a call that the cornea killer has stricken again. And the captain seems very interested in that. Cut to a church where there's this young blonde kid standing outside as who seems to be the priest comes in. And he's like, "Oh, son, do you need a place to stay? Like, you seem hungry and it's going to be freezing tonight. We can take you in." And he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't go into church. Bad things happen when I go into church." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We can still take you in. By the way, do you have a name?" And he's like, "Burden. My parents always called me a burden." So then we cut back over to the captain. They arrive at a homicide scene where this guy's been killed. There is a puddle of water beneath him for some reason, and also his eyes are gouged out, kind of the big thing. The cops that he was telling to leave before have arrived, and the captain wants them gone, and one of the officers is like, "Oh, God, they're good cops, Captain." He's like, "Oh, wow, that's a stupid opinion." So it's worth noting that a bunch of rats are apparently eating the corpse. Like, this place is so that much of a bad place. Cut back to the church, and all of a sudden, as he enters into the church, this burden guy, his neck does a full 360. He like says like, "Oh, I'm gonna worry. You should be worried about your own safety, holy man. I'm gonna." Basically, he's demonic and he's here to kill him. So the cops get the call that the slasher is at the church, and they're all like, "This must be our guy. We got to go now. Let's go catch him." So then we see a couple of shadowy figures who are like, "Hey, a big one's coming your way. Is everyone on tail?" And there's like a guy named Catharsis, and there's one named Tremor. And they're like, "Yep, we're all ready. We're all at our places." So cops arrive at the church. They kick down the door. There's this burden is just floating in the air, and he's like, "Hello, officers. Hell says hi." And we see that a rat is crawling up one of the officer's legs, and it has a note on it, and the note says war. And then all of a sudden, this dude springs out of the ground, controlling an army of rats, and he's like, "Hello, everyone. My name is Mouse, and I am the Prince of Rats." And then all of a sudden, Burden, like, he snaps out of it, and he's like, "Oh, you gotta help me, Father. The devil won't let me go." And then we see Tremor is standing outside, and she is just like, "Hey, all these cops have their guns aimed at me. I'm just going to go ahead and take care of them." The cops are going to be like, "Okay, well, we've got guns." And he's like, "It's not going to help you." So then she touches the ground, and this huge just earthquake happens, and all their cars fall into a crevice. And she's just like, "All right, I'm out." And she walks away. Prince of Rat manages to take his rat army and get everyone out of the church, or at least all the cops out of there. And the captain's like, "Jesus Christ, we're going to need backup and all the exterminators the city has." And then this woman pops up behind the captain and says, "I see you, Captain. You're trespassing." And we'll get back to her. The bad cop, the one who was sexually soliciting, gets flagged down by this woman, I believe named Catharsis. And she comes in wearing like metal wings, and she's like, "Here, you want to play with girls? How about you play with me?" And so he charges at her, throws some punches. She throws back just as hard, and she wraps her legs around his head, chokes him out, and says, "Oh, citizens arrest cop. How does that feel?" As he passes out on the ground. And then we go back to the girl who was talking to the captain, and it's like, "Here's the thing. We got rid of all your men. Anything between 10th Street and 20th Street, which is apparently the worst part of the town, is under the watch of this team of superhero teens called The Movement. They're the ones who recorded the stuff and sent it to the news channels. They're going to be an actually effective police force because they do not trust the cops here already." And the cop's like, "All right, fine. What are you going to do? Kill me?" And she's like, "No, I'm not going to kill you. Not yet." And she touches his forehead and is able to ride some emotional waves back to his house. And when she's done touching his forehead, she's like, "Okay, so by the way, your wife is cheating on you." And he's like, "You're lying. That's not, how would you even know that?" And she's like, "I just went to your house. It's one of your officers. Do you want to know their name?" And he's like, "No." "Yes." And he's like, "Oh, it's the other officer who was there with the sexually assaulting one. Like, he was the one who did it." So then she lays down the law again. It's like, "Again, you aren't allowed between 10th and 20th Street. This is our area. We're cleaning it up. Cops are not welcome." And he's like, "There's a killer in that church." He's like, "No, there isn't. That kid was not your cornea killer. That kid is just someone who was abused from the day he was born, and he has superpowers that make him like believe it. So we're going to take care of him." And that's the end of it. And the captain's like, "Screw that. Police are still law and order. I'm taking care of this now." And he runs back into the church. He tells the person at the altar, like, "I need your phone. There's some crazy kids out there. I'm going to bulldoze this place, and I'm going to martial law it or whatnot." And then the guy at the altar turns around. Turns out he's also part of the movement. He's got the silver mask, as does everyone in the congregation. And they're like, "I see you, Captain. You're no longer welcome here." I have never seen a superhero comic from a major publisher that be so anti-cop. And I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of digging how they're like, "Nah, man, you suck." I mean, I'm not, I mean, let's be honest here. I am pretty left-wing, all things considered. But like, I think this is really interesting from a book standpoint, not even by its politics, because it doesn't really have anything to do with like the rich or anything yet. It might get there, but this is solely a thing of like a group of vigilantes going all the way and saying, "No, the system has failed to the point where we don't even want it interacting with our area. We want to completely remove it from our area." And they're the heroes. They are the like protagonists of the book instead of a fringe like vigilante or something like that the actual hero has to fight. I appreciate that. I really like that different perspective because it's not something you get. Like, Batman's always worked with law enforcement. Superman's always worked with law enforcement. Half of them are working with like the CIA or Argus or whatever. I appreciate that there's one that's just like, "No, we don't want you here." So I'm into it. Art style, I'm a little hit or miss on Freddie Williams. I think he was really good on Captain Atom, but whenever he's drawing like just normal people, it's hit or miss. I think this is more hit than miss, but it is still, it has its problem areas. So we'll see how it manages to stick out. But I'm down for this book. I'm really interested. So I'm going to give it I'll give it just a solid 8. I'm really liking it, and I want to see where it goes because it's an interesting premise at the very least. Stormwatch number 20, written by Jim Starlin, art by Yvel Guichet. So last issue, the whole damn timeline restarted. We got a whole new Stormwatch team. They're going out on their first mission, and Lobo's there. He's just on this planet. So anyway, we show up on this planet, and immediately they're in trouble because they just warped into the middle of a crowd. And they're like, oh, geez, everyone's going to know we're here. And then they realize, oh, it seems like nobody cares. But Jenny's soul is getting overloaded by the number of people around. So they're like, all right, we got to get her up to a more isolated place where she can't hear as many minds, and then we'll reevaluate what to do. So they start going to clear a path. And all of a sudden, this weird lizard-looking guy says, oh, I've spotted the target, requesting backup. So then we cut to a few blocks away where Lobo, unconscious, is getting mugged by some guys, like they're robbing him. He all of a sudden wakes up and then just starts beating the ever-loving crap out of everybody. And once he's killed them all, he's like, that's a good way to start the fragging morning. And then one of the aliens that reset the timeline comes up, and he's like, hey, Lobo, I've got a proposition for you. You want to hear about it? And he, like, melts Lobo's mind and takes him back to his memories of him growing up on Zarnia. And we just basically get the origin of Lobo, where he walks him through and says, yeah, no, I just want to know what makes you tick, Lobo. And Lobo's like, okay. We all lived happy lives on Zarnia where we all shared a mixed DNA thing where like everyone got upgrades to their DNA all at the same time. And then during our last upgrade, they set the testosterone levels too high and everyone just started killing each other. I, being a brilliant scientist, killed my family and then made a poison in my lab. And I made an antidote for myself, but it killed every other Zarnian. And so I was the last one alive, and as such, the computers that were making everyone's DNA go crazy focused solely on me, so I became from normal human-looking guy to the Lobo we all know today. And then I went and did just crazy space adventures like drugs and porn and a bunch of other stuff. And the alien's like, okay, cool. So you're a monster, right? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And he's like, cool, that's exactly what I want. So at this point, Stormwatch has managed to make their way into a laboratory or a store or something. And Jenny Soul's calmed down now. The dude, what's his name? Skywatch, I think. He's mentally conversing with the Shadow Lords and just like, hey, if we're going up against an enemy that can like rewrite the timeline, couldn't they just beat us with like a thought? And the Shadow Lord tells them, no, if it was easy for them to do it, I feel like the Shadow Lords would have noticed it a little bit earlier, so it probably took a lot of effort on their end, and they're unlikely to do it again. And Skywatch's like, fair enough, I just don't like the fact my team has no idea what they're walking into. So, back down in the room, the forecaster calls out that the psi emissions are getting close to where the team is hanging out, and we see on the planet Jenny notices one of the aliens just kind of like pop his head in the room and then go back out again. And she's like, okay, well, they know we're here, so we got to deal with them now. And they're like, all right, cool, let's go to where they need to go. Midnighter and Apollo clear a path. So then we get this weird sequence of Lobo walking up to this floating light, pinching it between his fingers to extinguish it, walking away, and then the light comes back. And one of the aliens is like, hey, why is Lobo pinching out that light? And they're like, who cares? He's Lobo. Who really gives a crap? And they say how Jenny's soul is a problem that needs to be dealt with because her telepathy could actually stop their plans and their sacred efforts and whatnot. So, got to take care of that. We see a sniper on a roof attempt to shoot Jenny. She found out about it beforehand. She like read the mind and she ducks out of the way. Apollo shoots the sniper with his powers, and then an all-out battle breaks out because I don't know. They say that like, oh, live fire is not allowed in this area. So you broke the rules first, so now we're all able to do it. So Midnighter jumps in head first to a crowd. He looks like he's getting overrun. He easily breaks out of it. Apollo's worried about Midnighter, but he's like, you got it. Anyway, let's jump into this. The Weird is trying to protect Jenny more so than anybody else. He's like the personal bodyguard to Jenny. So he's doing whatever he can to attack him. And Jenny's like, please, I don't want to be here anymore. This is too dangerous. And Skywatch is like, yeah, she's right, man. I'm going to pull him out because this is too much. They're going to get overrun. And then all of a sudden, Forecaster says, hold on. A ship is coming from nearby, and it's friendly. And the ship starts firing at all the people who are attacking Stormwatch. And out steps this other lizard alien group. And Forecaster's like, I have no idea who these are, but they're on our side, so let's take the win where we can get it. And as the fight winds down and one of the sides is retreating, the other side that came in says, hey, we are the Caymanites. We are a religious order. The people that we are fighting against and who are fighting you were called Bruticus. They are like neo-fascists, and we've been stuck in a political war with them forever, and you're going to help us turn the tides. And Skywatch is like, are you telling me that Stormwatch's first mission just got involved in an intergalactic political war between a religious sect and fascists? That's just fantastic. That's great. I love this. So then Lobo, he's just stumbling through the alleyways. It seems he's still having visions being sent to him by the aliens, and they're like, hey Lobo, you're on a beach just watching some dolphins right now, but let me ask you something. Do you ever feel bad that you don't have a conscience? And Lobo's like, why would I feel bad if I don't have a conscience? And he's like, fair enough. But if I gave you the chance to rewrite your history and make it so all the bad things didn't happen, would you take that? And he's like, yeah. Imagine what I could get away with if nobody was after me anymore. That'd be friggin' awesome. And the alien's like, all right, cool. So you're in? He's like, yeah, why not? Sign me up. And that's the issue. Okay. This is a lot easier to understand than the last issue, but that being said, there was like a main dude who's leading this mission who has like the energy blasts. I know we introduced him last issue, but like they didn't say it again at any point in this issue. I think it's Hellstrike. Sounds right. You gotta give me more, man. This is the same problem I was having with Legion. You're introducing too many things and then you're not reintroducing them with each issue. It's been a month. I forget your new characters. You got to give me something here. The only reason I remembered Jenny Soul is because they said it like 4 times. I needed that for each of the characters, and you're not. On top of that, what are we doing with this alien plot? I'm sure, like, it sounds like there is a larger plan going on. It's not that the aliens just showed up and disappeared. They are the enemy, but I don't know. I still feel like I'm like only getting the vague outlines as to what the plan is. And maybe that's intentional, but it's getting me more and more confused as they continue on, because why in the hell would they need someone like Lobo? That's insane to me. So yeah, overall, I'll give this one I'll give it a 6.5. It's not great by any means, but it is above average. It's a perfectly reasonable comic book. It's fine. I don't know. There's nothing horrible about it except for the 18 issues that came before the new timeline throwing me off. I keep expecting it to like show back up. So yeah, 6.5. Animal Man number 20, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Jean-Paul Leon, and following up at the end with Timothy Green II. So if you remember like 10 plus issues ago, we had a little side issue where it was a movie that Buddy Baker starred in called Tights. And it got cut off in the middle. This is continuing the movie. It's saying, where did we go from there? Where the movie ended with Buddy's character Chaz is a quote-unquote superhero, no superpowers, that goes out and fights as Red Thunder, and he gets the crap kicked out of him and wakes up in the hospital. So we see the TiVo picking up the story here. Chaz is getting out of the hospital. He's got his Red Thunder outfit all cut up because they had to cut it off him in order to get out of it. He thinks there's no way he's going to be able to pay for his medical bills. Turns out that his wife already paid for it. And speak of the devil, the ex-wife and son come into the hospital room, and he's like, hey, you didn't have to pay for that. And she's like, how in the hell were you going to pay for it? And besides, I'm not the one who paid for it. It's my new husband, Dave. And it's just like, oh, Dave, great. That's the last thing I needed. And he starts arguing with his ex-wife in front of their kid. The ex-wife tells him, stop, the kid's here. And he tells him, like, oh, yeah, how about you and I, let's get out of here. Drop me back off at home. And they arrive back at his apartment. It's a wreck. And he asks his wife if he can keep the kid just for, like, a little extra time outside of normal custody stuff because he wants to spend some time with him after everything. And the kid is like, actually, Dad, I got homework. I gotta go home. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. But at that moment, in through the door busts this talent agent. And he says, hey, are you Chaz? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, your video of you storming in and, like, beating up those guys has gotten 12 million hits on our universe's equivalent of YouTube. You're like a minor celebrity right now. If you're not represented by anybody, I want to cash in on this. I'm going to help you get to actual stardom. And he's like, I don't know. I'm just a guy. I don't do this for fame. I do it because it's the right thing to do. And he's like, right. I get it. But, like, you could make some serious money out of this. And looking around, kind of seems like you need it. And he passes off his card and leaves. And the wife is like, so you're going to do it, right? Because you desperately need the money. And he's like, I just want to be like a hero for hero's sake. I don't want to do it for the wrong reasons. And he's like, Chaz, grow up, man. That's too much. So they both leave. And Chaz is left by himself. And he pulls out the card and makes the call. So then we cut to a montage of him going on the late night circuits and talking with different hosts about, like, oh yeah, I was just doing what I felt was right, but it's all this stuff. And then slowly he starts, like, dating different celebrities and starlets and stuff like that. He's showing up at premieres. He gets onto a Bachelor style TV show called I Want to Marry a Real Life Superhero, and he's doing, like, product placements for shaving brands and whatnot. So some time has passed. He's actually managed to get to a pretty good place star wise. He meets up with his wife again at some random Hollywood party because her husband is one of those, like, networking types. So she's just there by being the plus one. And they reconnect and they're talking. And Paige, the wife, is like, yeah, you've come a long way. I really didn't expect this of you. And I'm really proud of you that you've done all this stuff. And, it's you. And he's like, I didn't want it. I wanted to still be a superhero. That's who I still am underneath. I just wanted to do something right, And she's like, no, I get it. That's the reason I fell in love with you to begin with. And he misreads the signals, goes in for a kiss. Obviously, she wasn't feeling that. And she's like, okay, well, I just came out because you were alone out here. Goodbye. She leaves. So he leaves the party soon afterwards, and he's passing by this pool where this man is forcing himself on a woman. And he, being the good hero he is, jumps in and says, hey, get off her. And he's like, do you know who I am? And besides, who the hell are you? And he rips open his shirt and shows, I'm Red Thunder. Turns out, though, this dude was a high-ranking exec, and he then sues and blacklists Chaz because of, he's a high-ranking exec, and he is just able to do that stuff. So at that point, the agent calls him up and says, what in the hell were you even thinking? You're not a hero. You were a star before you just threw that all away, and now you have nothing. I'm not your agent anymore. You're done in this town. And Chaz is like, hey, I can still be the hero. I can still be Red Thunder. I'll always have that, and that's all I ever wanted to begin with. And he's like, oh yeah? You sold the rights to Red Thunder to make your brand. We own Red Thunder, and if you dare put that costume back on, we will sue you into oblivion. And he hangs up on him. So he goes and he sees the photos of, like, his kid dressed in the Red Thunder gear, and he pulls out his suit and he seemingly puts it on, but he goes out to a bridge and he looks at the photo of his kid one last time, And then all of a sudden, cuts to, he's been missing for 8 days. And nobody knows where he is. He's presumed dead. They have a funeral for him. And we see Paige and his kid go back home. And the kid goes up to his room and hears all this stuff on the news of some mysterious hero rescued people from fires. And he's been spotted, but nobody can ever get a good look at him. And then there's this package waiting inside the kid's room as he sees this stuff on the news. And inside of the package is the Red Thunder costume, along with the picture that Chaz originally had. And it seems that that's where the movie ends, because then we cut back to Buddy sitting in his hotel room that looks like it just as much a wreck as Chaz's. He turns off the TV, looks at a photo of his own son, who had recently died, and all of a sudden the phone rings. And on the other end of the phone, he first thinks it's Ellen, so he answers it that way. Turns out, though, no, it's his talent agent. And his talent agent is like, hey, man, you have been impossible to find, but you need to go rent a tux. You've just been nominated by the Academy for Best Actor. So that's where the issue ends. Seems that Buddy is back in at least the public eye for acting reasons rather than superhero stuff. I can't imagine a more traumatic thing going on right now. The fact that his own story of his own dead son and whatnot, and how he lost all of his powers, mirrors so closely to what was going on in the movie. Now he's going to be forced to go out on the circuit grieving like that. It's a good setup. I'm looking forward to seeing how we're moving forward with that. But, yeah, no, I mean, Jean Paul Leon's art, fantastic. R.I.P. It looks great. It gives a different vibe when we then cut back into real life. It just has this special stylized feel to it that makes it feel a bit more cinematic. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a solid 8. The only reason I don't go higher is because it is technically just a nothing issue. Like it's a well-told story, but it's not the story of Animal Man. It's a story within the story. So because it's not doing anything earth-shaking, it's just kind of an aside. It's great for what it is, but it's hard to give it a little extra boost because of it. Dial Age number 12, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. So last issue, the Fixer got called in as Nelson ended up using the Flash's powers for a little bit. And when they ran out, the Fixer is able to full-on warp space and time, and he's dead set on finding the dial. So this issue picks up with Centipede basically gloating like, you lose, we win, haha, you don't have a chance. And Nelson just hits him across the face and tries to run away with the dial. Fixer turns into, he's able to rapidly change forms via his own dial, and as he's going for the dial, Centipede gets there first and just like, well, now hold on. Before the dial, what about these two? Aren't you going to deal with them? And Fixer's like, dial first, everything else second. But while they're distracted, Roxy manages to run up, grabs the dial, starts running, and she's like, I'm sorry for whoever's powers I'm about to take, but we needed to dial. Before she's able to, though, Centipede gets his hand on it. He turns around to give it to Fixer, and Fixer just backhands him, saying nobody touches my dial but me. Nobody, even if he was trying to help. So at that point, he takes out this bone-like object and jams it into the dial, and there's a clicking noise, and it says that he turned it off. I don't know if that's a permanent thing or what, but he seemingly has disabled the dial. So he's about to attack Nelson, but then Roxy steps up and she's like, hey, Fixer, you want the dials, right? I have the S dial here. You just took the H dial, and I'm going to use it in order to stop you. So she transforms into a sidekick named Clinch, but as all sidekicks, she needs some direction. And immediately, Fixer starts telling her, hey, bring that to me. But Nelson reminds her, hey, you're not Clinch, you're Monteau. Remember that. You can ignore his orders. And so she puts on the Monteau outfit and she starts fighting back against Fixer as best she can. But she still needs orders, so Nelson manages to get his hands on the H dial again after Fixer dropped it and says all right, you need an order, get us out of here. So Centipede tries to get in the way. Clinch just clinch busts through all of them, carrying Nelson at super speeds through a hotel building, it seems, or an office building. And as they get up into an office, she reverse dials and turns back into Roxy. And it's at this point where they're just kind of like waiting it out, seeing if they manage to escape. And Roxy brings up like, hey, we need to talk about how we woke up last issue in bed together, that sort of thing. And she's like, we can talk as adults. It's not this embarrassing thing. And he's like, no, it was humiliating to me to wake up like that. Like, you didn't humiliate me, but like, I felt humiliated. And she's like, oh, okay, you got your own issues here. But at that point, they're listening at the door. They hear some movement, and Fixer and Centipede just bust right through. So Nelson, they're up on a high up level on this office building. He opens up a window, trying to get out, realizes there's no way out. And as soon as he opens the window, I lose the plot. Because busting in through the window is Open Window Man, who was a friend of Boy Chimney, like way back in the beginning issues. And everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Except for Nelson's like, I remember you. You're like your friend of Boy Chimney. And so he uses his defenestration punch to push Fixer and Centipede out the window. Centipede hits the ground, but I don't think it matters because of his powers. Fixer just turns into a bunch of balloons. And Open Window Man is able to use his powers to go through open windows like different portals. So he goes out through the open window, carrying Roxy and Nelson along with him, and they end back up at a different open window somewhere else. But Fixer and Centipede are not too far back. They've shown up. They're ready to fight some more. And as they're ready to fight, a tear in space-time, just like the Fixer uses, opens up, and out steps a huge group of dialers. They all have dials on them, and Open Window Man even calls them the Dial Bunch. So we see a couple of them fight back against Fixer and Centipede. They kick Centipede through the tear in space-time, which ends up going back to the lab that he came from, like where they brought the Fixer out from to begin with. So Nelson gets him in there and makes sure that he's held in there for a while. The other dialers use their dials to stun Fixer and then tackle him through. And then they both tackle Fixer and Centipede through the portal that Fixer came through to send him back into his own realm. And then they shut the door behind him. So at that point, we get introduced to the entire crew. They've got crazy ass names here. Unbled, Yaba, Ijad, and Dwan. Dwan stands for Dialer Without a Name. So, and he's like stuck on auto dial apparently, where he changes like every few seconds. So they're kind of just all figuring out what's going on there. Oh, and one of them is named Bonsa. And it turns out that Open Window Man is not a dialer. He's just a hero. Sure. So anyway, they're all getting acquainted, but then the scientist steps up and he's like, excuse me, guys, we just sent Centipede into Fixer's realm, correct? And they're like, yeah, now he's out of our hair. And it's like, right. But Centipede wanted to go to Fixer's realm. You guys just sent him to the exact place he wanted to be. I think that might be a problem. And that's where the issue ends. And by the way, the guy saying all that was a scientist, the same scientist who I think was helping to begin with. So, like I said, I lost the plot halfway through this. We just introduced these whole new concepts. One of them said something about dialing G for gear, because I guess there's a hero dial, there's a sidekick dial, there's got to be a gear dial as well. Sure. I like the idea that there's this group of dialers that is like also fighting against the Fixer, but like it's just hitting me with a lot all at once. And this is how I felt way back in the first arc. So I know there's the chance that it's going to get all sorted out, but like, it was a lot to take in. So overall, I did enjoy the issue. It was interesting at the very least. So I'll give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I think that it's proven that I can trust it, and I'm not that worried about it being too confusing, because I think it is going to end up explaining itself before too long. That being said, I think we've only got like 4 more issues, maybe, so sooner rather than later. The Phantom Stranger number 8, written by Dan DiDio and JMD Mateus, art by Philip Tan. So last issue, Phantom Stranger got run through with the Spear of Destiny on the behest of Question. And then he died, maybe, because this issue picks up just at the House of Mystery where Justice League Dark is, and he was apparently just sitting on the doorstep. No idea how he got there, but he is barely clinging to life as is. And Frankenstein hauls him inside and tells Constantine, like, we gotta fix him, man. We gotta try to solve him here. And so they clear off a table, lay him down there. A dead man's like, let me go in and see if I can, like, talk to his soul, get him to not go into light or whatever. And when Dead Man reaches inside, he's like, guys, we got a problem. Yeah, he's got a hole in his chest, but he also doesn't have a soul. Like, it's not there. How are we supposed to fix that? So at that point, we see where is Phantom Stranger's soul, and he's just in this dark room, sitting in a chair, single light on him, and there's another empty chair across from him, and he's like, is this heaven? Is this hell? I mean, it doesn't feel like either, because I've kind of been to both, but like, no, this is something else. This is some other dimension. So let's just see like where this goes. And in walks this guy with a flaming head, horrific looking, love the design of him, and he's like, hey, I've got a question for you, Phantom Stranger. And he's like, I'm so sick of questions. Yeah, no, I'm sure. Who are you? Who exactly are you? And Phantom Stranger's like, I mean, I've lived many lives. There's been known by many different names. I don't know really what you're asking here. And he's like, well, okay, let me ask you this. How many identities have you stolen? How many lovers have you abandoned? How many kids have you fathered and then just left to rot? And Phantom Stranger's like, I think you probably know that already. He's like, you're right, I do. My name is the Sin Eater, and I know exactly how many times you've sinned. But here's the thing. If you come after me, if you attack me while we have our little talk here, you will never see Elena, Allie, or Tim again. And he's like, oh, you're the one who took him. And he's like, no, I didn't. Or sorry, you're the one who took my family. And he's like, no, I didn't take your family. I took Philip Stark's family. And he's like, yeah, that's right. I know. You're not Philip Stark. This identity that you have, you stole it from someone else. You took the identity of Philip Stark and made it your own, but it is not you. And basically Phantom Stranger starts talking back, being like, no, you know, that I am Philip Stark now. Like it's I am him, he is me. It's my identity now. He's like, no. But that family, those kids, they don't belong to you. You killed a man in order to take his life. And as such, you've committed like all these sins of envy and greed and murder and whatnot. And we're going to talk about that. So then cut back to the real world, and Constantine has been trying a bunch of different spells to try to get Stranger's soul back. Nothing's working. And Zatanna puts out like, hey, here's the deal. We're kind of like general specialists when it comes to magic. Maybe we need someone a bit more specific, a bit more in-depth into soul loss. And he's like, oh, crap, I know who you're going to call. Can we not? And she's like, nope, no other chance. So she summons from hell, as far as I can tell, the Nightmare Nurse, who I'm unfamiliar with. But she's like, yep, I'll step in and I'll see what I can do. So we go back to the Sin Eater, and it's like, yeah, no, I've watched you for years. You've always played the part of Philip Stark, but you never quite got it right. You've always just had this hollowness inside of you, because even you know it's not true. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I wasn't Stark. I was better than him. And he's like, better? You think you're better than the man whose life you stole? You think that's you loved his family more deeply than he did? And he's like, yeah, I know I did. And we see what happened the last night. Originally, Phantom was going by the name Joshua. He was meeting up with Philip just because of what we'll get to. And he's saying goodbye to Elena and the kids. And Joshua was led by Philip into this back room because Philip's like a poet or something like that. But apparently in his back room, he's also a serial killer. So Philip was killing a bunch of people, but he's doing it in the terms of like, oh, I'm only taking out the bad people of the world to make it safe for my family in order to do that. And Joshua, you're one of those bad people. And he goes and he stabs the stranger. Of course, it doesn't quite work. And stranger holds him up and says how I am here to witness your sins and then lead you to be caught. That is the whole reason I'm here, because what you were planning on doing tonight was killing your family. And Philip's like, yeah, because this world is too evil for them to exist. They're too good. I love them too much for them to live in this world anymore. And basically he says like, yeah, no, I was supposed to come here and let you kill your family and take you to justice afterwards. But you know what? I've got a different plan now. And we see Elena calling down to Philip, and we see the shadow of the Phantom Stranger, but then he transforms into Philip, and it's just like, yeah, no, it's me, honey. Joshua left. He's not going to be coming back, and it's just me from now on. So at that point, the Sin Eater comes up and just be like, you think that you love the family more than somebody who was willing to kill for them just to keep them alive? And he's just like, what I did without any regret, and I would definitely do it again. Are you kidding me? Philip was absolutely evil. So then we cut back to Justice League Dark and the Nightmare Nurse. Apparently Constantine had a fling with her at some point, and he deeply regrets it, but Nightmare Nurse is like, oh well, you know how it goes. So Nightmare Nurse casts some magical spell, some like causing some surgery to basically rip his soul away from wherever it is and bring it back. But then we go back to Sin Eater and Phantom Stranger, and it's a whole lot of monologuing, but long story short, it's like, what you did was not just murder Philip. You took his consciousness, you ripped it apart, and you threw it into the cosmos. And it ended up in a place called the Land of Non. And as such, it had time to reconform and regrow and build itself fresh. And he became angry and upset, and he transformed into the Sin Eater. And at that point, Phantom Stranger realizes Sin Eater is Philip Stark. He's the guy that he murdered, and that's the reason why Sin Eater took his family, is because it was technically his family to begin with, and he was trying to take them out of this world. So at that point, Phantom Stranger does not keep his chill anymore. He lunges after Sin Eater, and in that moment is when they bring Phantom Stranger's soul back into reality and get him back to life again. And he sits up and he's like, what have you done? I almost had him. He's there and now he's gone and I don't know what to do. And they're like, dude, we just saved your life. Maybe a little bit of appreciativeness. And he's like, okay, yeah, fine, thanks. Anyway, I realize now where my family is and I know who has them. So I am now single-mindedly going to find them and bring them back home. And he opens up his hand, and earlier on I forgot to mention that there was this flower that when he took over Philip's life, he gave his new wife. That same flower is in his hand now. So I'm super interested. I love this concept. I think it's a great idea of this life that he took, because I never even questioned the fact that he must have taken someone else's life at some point. I just assumed that he just made up an entire personality and like just magically created the papers needed to make it a reality. But no, he took someone else's life and just lived their form. I think that that's a solid reveal. I really do enjoy it. So does it really feel like it flows on from the last issue? No, it's kind of its own separate thing, but I enjoyed it for what it was. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a solid 8 out of 10. I really think it's solid. And Philip Tan's art, beautiful. Fantastic. Cannot speak highly of it. So, yeah, 8 out of 10. Looking forward to seeing how Sin Eater continues. Swamp Thing number 20, written by Charles Soule, art by Kano. So last issue, Swamp Thing went to Metropolis to talk to Superman. He ran into Scarecrow. Scarecrow fear-gassed him, and then all of the Greens started attacking Metropolis. So we pick up in the dream that Swamp Thing is having, And we see Alec Holland and Abigail Arcane are married. They've grown old. They have some kids. And one of the kids is going out and just frolicking in the garden. And as she's out there, Swamp Thing comes up, touches her hand, and then she is immediately consumed by the green and turned into like a plant creature. Alex sees this through the window, comes out, and basically snatches the kid away and says, I warned her to watch out for monsters. I warned her to watch out for things like you. And then we cut back into Metropolis, where basically emergency services are completely overcalled to the entirety of the city being attacked by these plants. They see a couple of people trapped down an alley where a bunch of Venus flytraps are coming up and seemingly about to go and eat them. And they're like, okay, we only got one option here, and that's to attack it with an axe. So let's get in there and start swinging. They're like, what if it's not able to be hurt? What if it attacks us? Like, we might not be able to make it through this. And they're like, it's our job. We got to get in there and do it. So they count up to 3, but before they can get to 3, Superman comes in. He super freezes it and allows them to get the citizens out of there. But not before the fire chief steps in, and he's like, hey, Superman, is this one of your things? Did you cause this? Or is it like one of your supervillains doing this? And Superman's like, no, I don't think it's one of mine. He's like, well, you know what? This didn't used to happen. It used to be okay to live in this city without crazy crap like this happening all the time. So yeah, we'll just keep working. Thanks for whatever it is you're doing. And Superman's like, okay, I don't blame him. He's pissed off. That's fair. But I'm reasonably sure this is Swamp Thing, and I just got to track him down. So then back into the dream, we see Alec is walking around Swamp Thing through like his lab and stuff. And he's like, yeah, no, I got a Nobel Prize for my stuff. And here's some extra stuff I did here. And yeah, my life really turned out great. No, by the way, I have kids with Abby. You want to go see them? And he leads her over to the kids. And he's just like, yeah, no, I have all this. And you could have had all this, but you threw it away. You threw it away to become the Swamp Thing. And you chose plants, and all that's going to remain after everything is said and done is plants. Because remember, that's all there is now. You're not Alec Holland under there. You're not human anymore. You're the Swamp Thing. You are nothing but a plant monster. And when you die, all you will have is the plants, which will eventually corrode and become part of the green once again. Like, you will not be anything. So the plants are getting more and more restless. They're attacking this bridge coming out of Metropolis. Superman's holding it up, letting the civilians get off. But then he hears screaming from the other side of the city, and one of the buses is being crushed by this vine. And there's no way that he can get over to it while keeping the bridge up. So he uses his heat vision off of the Daily Planet's globe to reflect down onto the bus and attack the plant enough for the people to get out. And he's like, all right, cool. Managed to save everybody. Everyone's off the bridge. I gotta go figure out where Swamp Thing is. I gotta cut this off at the head. And he flies up high. He sees that it's all kind of coming from the botanical gardens. He's like, yeah, okay, I probably should have thought of that place first. And he flies down there and he sees Swamp Thing asleep, but clearly like screaming out in pain. And Scarecrow's there and he's like, Superman, hey, yeah, this is my fault. I won't own up to that, but I had no idea that this was going to happen. I thought he was just like some crazy plant dude. So he asks Scarecrow if there's any way to wake him up. He says, no, I doused him with like a bunch of stuff. I don't know what it did. And basically Superman looks at Swamp Thing just crying out in this nightmare, and he revs up his heat vision and says like, sorry, I've got no choice. I got to do this. So in the dream, the skeleton of Alec Holland's like, yeah, no, the Green told you that you were special and you were different and you were like all this special stuff. But like, the Green hasn't changed. The Parliament of Trees hasn't changed. They want you to be the same as Anton Arcane was. They want you to make it so that they are the only thing around. They want a world full of green. And that's what you're going to do. Everything else can just burn. And then all of a sudden everything catches on fire. And we see Swamp Thing finally snapping out of it as he's being burned alive by Superman. Superman hears him scream. He uses super breath to put him out. Swamp Thing's now a lot of smolders and solars and whatnot, but he's very quickly getting back on his feet. And he's like, hey, Superman, how did you know that the flames would leach out the Scarecrow toxin? And Superman's like, I didn't. Was just kind of hoping for the best there. So Superman tells him, hey, you weren't aware of it, but you're causing like mass chaos in my city. Could you maybe tone that back? And he's like, oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, totally. Pulls back all the vines. And he's like, hey, I'd love to help out and make things right if that's okay with you. And Superman's like, you've done plenty. I'm going to take care of this from now on. And Swamp Thing's like, yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I was hoping that maybe you could help me with something. Can we just talk for a second? And Superman's like, I really got to get back out there and help clean up the damage. And at that point, Scarecrow's trying to sneak away, and Swamp Thing just grabs him with a bunch of vine and keeps talking to Superman. And Superman's like, look, I know this wasn't your fault. I get it. But with people like us who have this immense power, we have to be in control of it all the time. And if there's any chance that we lose control, we just got to go away. We can't be around other people. That's our burden, but it's what needs to happen. And Swamp Thing's like, yeah, no, I'll leave. I get it. But let me ask you a question first. You aren't a human, and yet you connect with them. You walk among them. You choose to act like a human. How do you do that? And he's like, yeah, no, I feel disconnected all the time. It happens whenever you're flying above people. But what you need to do is choose to connect. Find people to help. Go out there and be a part of it. And that's going to make you as human as you want to be. And so Swamp Thing sees Superman fly away with Scarecrow. He dissolves back into the green. He shows back up in Louisiana. And when he comes back out, there's a woman there waiting. And she's like, Avatar, I thought you'd never return. I need you to save me, as she kneels down before him. So a little 2-issue arc just to set up how much of a human is Swamp Thing going to be, really? Seems to be an interesting story. I love Superman's take on it. Fantastic view of like, no, you got to work at it, and it's really hard, but it's something that needs to be done. So I'm liking the way Charles Soule's taking this to begin with. I got to say, whether or not this new person stepping up, being like, oh, help me, Avatar, it can go either way. It's just 2 panels. I'm not going to judge it based off that. I'm looking forward to it at the very least. But I think this has been a super solid 2-issue arc, especially because Superman feels like Superman in it. He steps in and he's like, look, I'm going to do what I have to do here, but I'm hoping that it's not going to end up with any like unnecessary deaths. So overall, I'm going to give this one, I'm probably going to give it an 8.5, honestly. I really think this is a solid issue. I can't think of much to fault it with. Even the Scarecrow bit where he was just like trying to slink away after everything was said and done. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed everything about it. So yeah, 8.5 for this. Really do like it. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this May 1st, 2013. And yeah, like I said, pretty basic episode. Some cool stuff thrown in there. Got The Movement first issue. Got a new Batwing. Green Arrow is always fun, or at least it has been for like 3 months now. But yeah, pretty basic week. Unlike next week, because next week is also a basic week, but it has 6 different issue numbers, which kind of messes with my flow in trying to read them off. I know this is a totally me problem and you really don't care at all, but it makes it awkward for me to say it. So bear with me as I try to list off all of next week's comics. We have Batman number 20, Batman and Robin number 20, Superboy number 20, Green Lantern Corps number 20, Threshold number 5, Justice League of America 3, because Geoff Johns finally managed to figure out how to get something out on time, Katana number 4, Deathstroke number 20, Suicide Squad number 20, Team 7 number 8, Ravagers number 12. Those last 2 are series finales, so be sure to check those out. Constantine number 3, and Demon Knights number 20. Miss any of that? Just check in next week. I promise your favorite comic is being published. And it's at the very end, so you have to listen through the whole thing. Don't check the timestamps. Anyway, yeah. What do I need to tell you about? I need to tell you about some special stuff. We have a Discord and a Reddit and a Patreon and a Twitter, and all those places are places that you can share your thoughts and let us know what you thought of the comics that came out this week, last week, or any week. I am especially told that there is a new tier on Patreon for those of you who like me enough to pay $50. And by me, I mean likely other people on the Mild Fuzz Network, because I don't see a lot of income that way. As I said in the beginning, I have bills, man. Please help. So, yeah, be sure to check that out if it's any interest to you at all, to get some bonus perks at the beginning and or middle of this episode. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. Be sure to give it thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. I don't care. Interact. Let me know you're here. I would love praise, but I'll also just take a, hey, how are you? That's all I'm really asking for in the end. Anyway, thank you again. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.